must have made when they lynched me. Eversman's eyes bugged out horribly. The leather cord bit into his neck, making a deep red indentation, and then I let go of him. He would kill me if he could, but I couldn't kill him. He fell into the mud. Somehow I had opened a big cut on his cheek just above his mouth. Blood oozed out. I began unwinding the whipcord from my ankles. I stood over him, breathing hard. "You've cut your face, Phineas. Ask Doc if he's got any wintergreen for that." Chapter 134. In the backyard, I found the old checker players from Hempel's store tying up Byram Cheney, the retired teacher in whose wagon I'd been taken to the Klan rally. That rally and the lynching that followed seemed to have taken place 100 years ago. I heard an odd glunking sound behind me and turned to see two men with kerosene cans working their way along the side of Abraham's house, splashing fuel on the foundation. The one nearest me was the renowned legislator, Senator Richard Nottingham, Elizabeth's husband. The military jacket he wore for this night's action was too small for him. The fabric gaped open around the buttons. "Bring a match to that fuel," I called out, "and I'll shoot you dead. Be my pleasure." The other man was bent over, facing away from me. He whirled and pulled a handgun. To my horror, it was Jacob Gill. "Drop your gun, Ben," he said. "I would shoot you dead too." Around us swirled a madness of yelling, fighting, and dust, screaming, cursing, and gunfire. Yet at that moment, it felt as if Jacob and I were facing off all alone in the middle of a giant empty room. "Why, Ben?" he croaked. "Why'd you have to come back and ruin our nice little town?" Chapter 135. Jacob just kept walking toward me. Finally, my face hovered inches from his, so close I could smell whiskey and bacon grease on his breath. His face was covered with stubble, the skin on his nose peppered with gin blossoms. I lashed out and grabbed his gun hand and twisted it hard until the weapon dropped. Jacob was always smaller, but he could whip me at least half the time when we were boys. He was wiry and strong and not afraid to fight dirty. I remembered the venom he could turn on our enemies when we got together in a schoolyard scrap. "God damn you, Ben!" he yelled. Then I saw he had a knife. I took his arm and held it with all my strength. It felt as if we stayed that way for hours, grappling, neither of us gaining an advantage, the razor edge suspended between us. My arms ached. I looked Jacob in the eye. "Jacob!" I yelled at him. "It's me, goddammit! It's Ben!" But his eyes were bulging with rage, one hand now gripping my throat, the other inching closer with the blade. If he killed me here, amid all this noise and insanity, no one would ever know it was Jacob who had done the deed. I would just be Ben Corbett, another victim in another senseless attack in a small town. And then I knew that was not how it was going to happen. I was not going to die here at the hand of Jacob Gill. That knowledge gave me strength, just enough to jerk his arm sideways and break his hold on the knife. I kicked Jacob hard and wrenched the knife away. I got on him, kneeling on his chest with the blade an inch from his neck. I could have slit his throat right then, but instead I poked the knife into his Adam's apple, hard enough to draw blood. Jacob's eyes widened. God, I knew those eyes. "You gonna kill me, Ben?" he said. I flung the knife away and heard it crash into the bushes beside the smokehouse. Then I got up. There were no words for this, so I turned and walked away from the man who had once been my best friend in the world. Chapter 136. While I was fighting Jacob, the rest of the fracas had begun to die down. I watched Sam Sanders, owner of the general store, jump off his horse and run away into the darkness. I saw 2 other white raiders flee in his wake, one of them limping badly. "We'll come back for you niggers," one yelled as he ran. "You ain't won. You just think you won," another called. A flurry of hoofbeats, and the raiders were gone. Colored people were scattered all over the yard, nursing wounds. 4 white men lay trussed up in the dirt in front of Abraham's house. I remembered Abraham talking about the earth running red with blood, and saw blood, tiny rivers of it, here on his home ground. On the porch near the tied-up men, Aunt Henry was dressing the leg wound of Lincoln Alexander Stevens, another of the original white raiders who had come calling tonight. Aunt Henry would take care of anyone, I reflected, regardless of race, creed, or degree of idiocy. The only fatality seemed to be Leander Pernot, who lay flat on his back in the mud across the road from Abraham's house. I wouldn't miss him for a second. Cousin Ricky told the captured raiders he could kill them, or he could tar and feather them, or he could do what he was going to do, drive them into town and leave them tied up for the citizens of Eudora to find in the morning. "Tell 'em what we did to you," he said. "Tell 'em there's as many of us in the quarters as there is of you in town. Don't come out here again, not unless you're invited, which ain't likely." Richard Nottingham brought his flat wagon out of the woods. Brown hands helped him lift Leander Pernot's body up into the bed. Nottingham's shoulder was bandaged. The battle was over. Eudora Quarters had won, at least for one night. It would not help me or the people of the quarters to shoot one more bullet. It was finished. And if I needed more proof, from around the house came Jacob Gill, his shirt front stained red with blood from where I'd nicked his throat. He walked between 2 colored men to the wagon and climbed in the back without looking at me. So be it. "Mr. Corbett?" I looked up. It was Ricky standing at the front door. "Come on back in," he said. "Abraham has passed." At the door, Ricky put his hand on my shoulder. "You all right?" "I am." Moody glanced up as we came in, then went back to reading from the Bible. "And he said, 'Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingly power.' And Jesus said to him, 'Truly I say to you, this day you shall be with me in paradise.'" Moody closed the Bible. She looked up and our eyes met. We had already spoken our last words to each other. Chapter 137. "Are you staying for Abraham's funeral?" LJ asked. "I'll go with you, Ben." "I don't think so," I said. "Moody already knows how I feel about him, and it's definitely time for me to head back, you know." "North," LJ said. "Go ahead, say the word. You're headed back up to damn Yankee land to become a damn Yankee again." We were standing near the table in the war room where we'd spent so many hours plotting our strategies for the White Raiders' trial. I was just finishing packing. "I've gone around and around in my mind, LJ, and for the life of me, I don't know what I would do differently," I said, "if I had the luxury of doing it over again." "You did as much as you could, Ben. Most men wouldn't even have tried to help." I slipped my razor and shaving brush into the little leather kit and tucked it in my valise. "Help?" I said. "Is that what we did? I think some of the help I gave ended up hurting them." "Go ask them. Go to the quarters," LJ said, and ask them if they're worse or better off for what you did. I can have a man drive you up to Macomb so you can get the earlier train to Memphis, LJ went on. No need for that. I'll just take the good old 205. I snapped the catches on my valise. I might stop over in Memphis tonight and hear a bit of that music I told you about. Sure you don't want to stay here a day or two more? LJ asked. Rest up? I shook my head. It's time to go. I've said my goodbyes, and I suspect I've worn out my welcome in Eudora. In fact, I'm sure of it. My own father said as much. Chapter 138. 3 days later, I stepped off the train in Washington. The station's marble floors squeaked when I walked across them, and I once again admired the acres of gold leaf and ranks of granite arches like victory gates. A man entering Washington through this portal was glorified and enlightened by the passage. But one man, Ben Corbett, coming home after all these months, felt as lowly and insignificant as a cockroach scurrying along an outhouse floor. My mind was a jumble, a clutter of worries. I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had passed and all the terrible things that might yet happen. Meg had never answered my letters. I thought it likely that I would return to an empty house, shuttered and forlorn, my wife and children having gone off to live with her father in Rhode Island. I could imagine the walls empty of pictures, white sheets covering the furniture, our modest lawn overgrown with foot-high grass and weeds. These were my dark thoughts as I made my way through happy families on holiday, returning businessmen, flocks of government workers, Negro porters in red coats and bellboys in blue caps. "Mr. Corbett, sir?" A voice rang out down the platform. "Mr. Corbett! Mr. Corbett!" I stopped, searching the oncoming faces for the source of the greeting, if indeed it was a greeting. "Mr. Corbett, right here. I'm so glad I found you." He was a young man, short and slight, with wire-rimmed glasses and an intensely nervous stare. I had seen him somewhere before. "Mr. Corbett, I'm Jackson Henson, the White House." "Ah, Mr. Henson," I said. "What a surprise to see you here." He smiled hesitantly, as if not quite sure whether I'd made a joke. "Will you come with me, sir?" "I'm sorry." I looked down at his hand cupped on my elbow. "The president would like to see you immediately." "Oh, yes, of course," I said. "And I would like to see him, but first I thought I would see my family." "I'm sorry, Mr. Corbett. The president is at the White House right now. He's waiting for you." So I followed Henson outside to a splendid carriage drawn by the handsomest quartet of chestnuts I'd ever seen. All the way to the White House, I kept thinking, dear God, please see to it that Teddy Roosevelt isn't the only person in Washington who wants to see me. Chapter 139. Theodore Roosevelt jumped up from his desk and came charging at me with such high spirits I was afraid he might bowl us both over. "Welcome home, Captain!" he roared. When he pumped my hand, I recalled that Roosevelt didn't consider a handshake successful until it resulted in physical pain. "And all congratulations to you, sir, on a difficult job extremely well done," he exclaimed. "The White Raiders' trial was a smashing success." "But, Mr. President, we lost the case." "Of course you did," he said. "I knew you would, technically, lose the case, but you won a tremendous victory all the same." "I don't think I understand." He sank onto the sofa to the left of his desk and patted the seat cushion next to his, as if I were a faithful dog being summoned. I sat.